Hello again, and welcome back to Illegally Cited. This is Jesse, and I am back for another. I'm not sure if this will be a bonus video or probably a Wednesday video, but I just released a channel update video a couple days ago. But I just wanted to do my kind of quick take on the events of the last couple of days. Because as I said in the previous update video, we had the Sento Showdown on Saturday and Sunday, the all blind and low vision fighting game tournament with Mortal Kombat 1. And then we had the Game Accessibility Conference, aka GAConf, Monday and Tuesday. It is Tuesday evening as I'm recording this, and boy howdy. Yeah, these were pretty, they were long days, but they're always so informative. They're so fun. I love learning about everything in these sessions, and there was some pretty cool stuff this year. And so, yeah, I just wanted to give my few thoughts on it. Again, I'm not really going to do the full channel update stuff and, blah, 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 but I might have a bonus video or so coming up to you guys here soon with Halloween falling on a Thursday. Maybe try to release one game that has a little bit more spookiness to it. We'll see what happens. But yeah, Monday, Wednesday, Saturday, do my videos. Everything's in playlists. Welcome if you're new. If you discovered this channel through the Game Accessibility Conference, welcome. I hope you find something that is of interest to you. Yeah, maybe I will give a little bit of an intro, but just because, again, I was on the Discord and shared my information through the Game Accessibility Conference Discord. So, illegally cited. I do unlock videos every Monday, Wednesday, Saturday, sometimes more often. Holiday or really cool big game announcement or accessibility announcement, or just because. Everything is in playlists. I cover games as a low vision user, but I cover games that can be played by someone with no usable vision. I cover assistive technology, mainstream technology, the other geeky stuff. I've got a Growing Up Illegally Cited playlist that I'm particularly proud of, where I answer a lot of questions about blindness, low vision, myself, being a content creator, being an assistive technology specialist, being an game and technology accessibility advocate and consultant. All that kind of stuff. I used to cover VR for a while. I've taken a hiatus on that because there really hasn't been much, if anything, in the way of platform level accessibility on the VR headsets. I would really like to get a Quest 3, but I just don't know if I want to spend money on another fairly inaccessible device. But yeah, just check out the playlist section. You'll hopefully find something there that you might like. I do have also a game accessibility, a VR accessibility playlist. I've got, God, what else? I've got a playlist for accessible AI, because there's been a lot of that happening in the last year and a half. So that's becoming a pretty big thing. There's a lot of interesting stuff happening there. Very interesting stuff, actually. But yeah, a lot of different playlists. My podcasts, presentations, and interviews playlist. I've done a lot of public speaking at the Game Accessibility Conference. Not this year, but in 2019 and I think it was 21 or 22 that I did. But also a lot of other things. So you can check that out on the channel as well. You can also find all of my other sort of miscellaneous projects at illegallycited.com. Just a very, very basic website. So, the main couple things I just want to talk a little bit about are the Sento Showdown, which was a lot of fun. And, this is a all blind and low vision Mortal Kombat 1 tournament. And there were a lot of good competitors. The guy that won the last few years sat out this year, so we got a new champion. But I'm not going to tell you who that is, because you'll just have to go check out KH Rattlehead's YouTube channel and check out the archives for the Sento Showdown. So, the first day they kind of went through all the brackets. They had a few different brackets and, got their winners and losers stuff figured out, and then for their top 8. And then day 2 was going through the top 8 and deciding the rank of them. So, anything from 1 through 8. And there were some familiar people. There were some new combatants this year, and that was pretty cool to see. They had some technical difficulties on the first day for the first hour or two, but once we got through those, it was pretty smooth sailing. And the second day went really well. That was pretty entertaining to watch. So huge shout out to Rattlehead and the rest of the crew. This is the 4th Sento Showdown. And they even had the guy who does Kenshi at the end of the tournament. So that was a really cool thing. Voice actor guy. So that was, I can't remember his name. Sorry, dude. So yeah, it was just a really, really cool thing. They had a couple of prizes that you could win in the Twitch chat. This year they had, was it a Funko Sub-Zero or something? It was like a Funko Pop figure or whatever. So I didn't win this year, but like I said, I won the other a year or two ago, so that was cool. But yeah, huge. I'm so glad that we're having these types of tournaments because it shows that, hey, blind people can play on a competitive level just like everybody else. And just to get the whole word out there about the level of skill that people with disabilities can have if given the right accessibility in a game, and just getting the word out there about, hey, game accessibility in general. Look at this fully, this tournament is run by a blind individual. It's the participants are blind or low vision. I think they're mostly blind. I thought about entering, but I just have not devoted enough time, or I just have so many other things going on that I would need to get, I would be a complete scrub and I would just get annihilated the first round. So I figure I'll leave it to the professionals and I'll watch, and I'll just, I'll plug the tournament and I will promote it and I will watch it. But, who knows? Maybe I'll be weird one year and enter it. But anyway, Sento Showdown. I want to give my brief thoughts on the Game Accessibility Conference. I hope some of you did end up joining and watching the conference virtually. If you are at all interested, as I hear comments all the time on Twitter or through my YouTube comments or email or whatever, how do I get into the industry? How do you do what you do? There's so much you can learn from the Game Accessibility Conference. There's just so much. This is the place to be. If you can't make it in person, the last several years now, they have offered it virtually. The tickets are free. You just need Zoom, or you can watch the YouTube stream. There's a Discord where you can chat with people live, and that's a lot of fun. I saw a lot of familiar faces in the chat the last couple of days, and so just going to run through some thoughts and some cool things that were covered in this year's conference. So we had our usual, we started with Ian Hamilton, and he did his news update. And so there were, again, 2024, the kind of sentiment is that, compared to 2023, like last year was amazing. We had Diablo, we had MK1, we had Forza, we had indie games, there was tons of stuff for blind low vision players last year. But there's been a few indie games. There's been some nice updates to things like Diablo 4, which I really need to get around to playing again yet, so I can check out their additional screen reader updates and their overworld navigation assist. I have to do a video on that when I get a chance. I swear I will. But other than that, like especially AAA, there really hasn't been anything that has been totally blind playable. There's been a fair few games that have had pretty decent low vision features. Like I've seen some high contrast things. I've seen some font size things. I've seen, UI or even like, visual indicators for things. But sadly, not near as much in the way of total blind accessibility. And again, one of the things to stress, we've talked about this a few different times in the Discord the last couple of days, and I've mentioned it on the channel, but just because we didn't see any games, major games this year, does not mean that things are stopping. Yes, it is discouraging. Yes, it's annoying. I agree. I get it. But at the same time, games take a long time to make. And so if a game came out last year from a development team, let's say, for the last 2 years, they probably get another year or two for their next game to cook. So, you're not going to be getting constant game releases. And again, more and more developers are starting to acknowledge and implement accessibility. So all of this does take time. It is frustrating. I totally agree. But again, there's been a couple of, I don't want to say hateful, but rather rude posts I've seen on Twitter the last couple of weeks that people just like, oh, this isn't accessible. Oh, why don't you even care? You gotta quit that because again, if you are like that, if someone came up to me and said, your stuff is crap and why don't you make this work better? If they approach me in that way, I'm going to be more likely to brush them off because even if like, yes, I get where they're coming from, but if you're going to be a dick about it, well, then I don't really have to acknowledge you. I don't have time for that. I mean, if you have something constructive to say, you have some questions, you have, anything like that, then we'll talk. But, again, there's so much effort that goes into all this that it just takes time. And I don't know if you've noticed, but also the last couple of years have been kind of a shit show in the game industry. I saw earlier today, as I'm recording this video, the company that made Concord, that Sony game, down in like 11 days. Unfortunately, that studio is being closed pretty much immediately. So that is super rough. I mean, every other day there's closures, mergers, buyouts, layoffs, and CEOs getting bonuses and like they got to meet their shareholder quota. I'm not gonna get off on that rant because I so easily could, and I don't want to say something I'm gonna regret. But it hasn't been it's in some ways it's been a great year because there's been tons and tons of indie games. Yes, I know they're not blind accessible, but even for low vision accessibility, I can't keep up. There's so much in my Steam backlog. There's stuff on my Switch. So it's a great year for gamers, but a horrible year for the industry. Again, all these layoffs and stuff. So news update, we had some hardware, we had some new resources, we had things happening with accessible events. Like the cool thing is Gamescom, they basically are mandating that all booths have wheelchair access and other different accessibility standards that they meet so that if you have a disability, you can go and attend this ginormous gaming event in Europe, that you can do that. And that's really cool. And I would love to see that's really what the rest of the industry needs to do. And wouldn't you know, the very next session, the first real session after Ian, Accessible Doom, Mr. Alan D1 did his presentation on the Toby accessibility mod. It was great to see. It was really fun being in the Discord, and like I was answering questions because I've been a big part of the mod, and so they had a pretty lengthy. He did the presentation, but then he had a pretty lengthy gameplay clip of showing the levels and the mechanics and just how the audio and the features worked. and people who were having good questions, and so I was trying to answer them, and it was really cool. I'm really glad that like because I've heard from so many people, blind players, they want first-person shooters, they want third-person shooters, they want action games. They want more than just board and card games and text adventures. And I get that. And so I really hope that any developers watching, this is the accessibility conference. And so I'm really, really hoping that this gives more developers that are developing these types of games. Oh, yeah, like, God, if they can do it in a 30-year-old Doom engine, there's got to be something we can do for a more modern game that we're currently developing. There was somebody from id in the chat room, so I was subtly hinting, could you tell us a little bit more about some Doom Dark Ages accessibility? I won't tell, but no, I couldn't coax it out of him. But, like I said, at least people from Bethesda are seeing it. People from the industry, other creators, I'm so glad this was featured. Because the team and Alan have worked so hard on it, and I'm just proud to be a small part of it. So that was a really cool first session to see. Then they had a session on Assassin's Creed Nexus accessibility, which is their VR Assassin's Creed. And again, it looked really cool. They had some stuff for, like different motion sickness, or for, again, you have the fear of heights, and, a big part of Assassin's Creed is you're scaling buildings and stuff. So there was a lot of different things about like locomotion and sensoring and different control types, and again, just a lot of different things on how to make a really typically your characters in Assassin's Creed are really nimble and parkouring all over the place, and so how do you adapt that into something VR related? That was a cool session. Servers up, everyone's welcome. This was oh, what was that one? That one was... Oh, that was the panel, I think. Okay, yeah. That was really good. Yeah, so again, the first day they had a panel of developers, and the second day they had a panel of users. We'll get to that one in a bit. But this was cool because they had somebody from the MK1 team, they had somebody from Sea of Thieves, and they had somebody from Diablo 4, and they were just really talking about a lot of different things related to, like what goes into adding accessibility, whether it's like a game that you're initially releasing, or adding accessibility post-launch, what happens in a live service game. Again, a lot of things where people kind of get frustrated that, oh, this is, I can't play this and this feature isn't available. And there was really good talk in the panel, and there was also some really good chat in the Discord about that. Was a really good panel. I definitely recommend that one. Then they had lunch. Then they had a quick session on Tourette's. And that was pretty interesting, actually, because, just the way that media generally portrays it. This, what do they call it? Copiolalia, I think, if I'm butchering that. That's the one, where everyone's like, oh, you swear all the time. That's a very small portion of what Tourette's is. I mean, like I said, I can't help it. Every time I think of Tourette's, I think of that South Park episode. I know it's wrong, but it was a really funny episode. But I mean, it was a really cool thing. Again, I like learning about other different disabilities and challenges that I'm not as familiar with, because, a lot of people have multiple disabilities, and even for my day job, I might get somebody who is blind or visually impaired, but maybe they're hard of hearing, or maybe they're in a wheelchair, maybe they, maybe they have some other disability. And so I like to learn, not just challenges, but I like to learn like how they cope or how they compensate, what type of adaptations are helpful. So all that was really good. Developing in the dark. Oh, this was the one, I think, from Zach, Xanagrams, I covered his iOS game. That was also a really good session because he kind of talked about his journey from when he became blind not too many years ago, and then trying to figure out, like, learning the technology as a blind user, and then realizing that, oh God, what coding environment is accessible where I could try to make something, and his sort of journey on that. And he had some really interesting stories, like, oh, I thought I designed this really well, I had things coded correctly, I thought, and I had someone sighted look at it and go, oh, we need to change some of this because it looks really bad. So it's kind of a thing of like, oh, as a blind user, you're designing, and you want to get sighted feedback to make sure that, like, everything looks, contrast wise is good, or that things are aligned correctly. But it was just a really good session, and he's writing a book. No idea when it's coming out, but I'd be very intrigued to read about that because he said it's going to talk about more like his journey. He used to be a veteran, and then, I'll just say, things went really dark for him for a while, and he had a really rough time of things. And I'll let him tell the story, watch the session. But then, from that to his journey becoming blind and becoming a game developer, app developer, really cool. I definitely want to read that book when it comes out. Cheat codes for all. Yeah, I think we had a similar session on this a few years ago, and I totally agree. Remember when NES games, like 8 and 16-bit games, even N64 games to some degree, had cheat codes, and you could, hit a button combination to unlock them. Now, oh, you want extra health or you want to unlock something? Well, now you have to do microtransactions or paywalls or some other BS that it's really shitty. And, if you're playing multiplayer, that's one thing. But if you're playing a single player game, maybe you do need to cheat to get through this level, because there's been levels in certain games where I can play the game fine, but maybe there's a sniper level in a first person shooter that I literally cannot see the guys quick enough, and I just one shot, one kill, and I'm dead. Um, some of those, or stealth levels where there's alarms, and I just have trouble. So whatever it is, that was just a really, really good session on cheat codes, and I really wish that they would return and not monetize everything. Learning and memory in video games. Yeah, forgetting is frustrating. That was also a pretty good session, and even I wouldn't say that I have like memory problems or ADHD or anything like that, but like, I quit a game for a while, I come back and I go, how in the what are the controls, or what am I supposed to be doing again? Like going back to Diablo 4, I haven't played it in probably 10 months. So it's like, boy, do I start over? I wonder if I can get back into my character again, because they totally redid a lot of the weapons specs and gameplay mechanics, and so who knows what I'm going to do with that. But that was also a really good session, and the Discord chat. Yes, this one was really fascinating. I won't pretend that I didn't understand all of it, but it was still fascinating. So it was the developer of Periphery Synthetic. That was that first-person, non-violent Metroidvania that I covered on the channel probably within the last month or two. It's a neat game, and now that I really understand what all went into it, it's even more fascinating, because the whole thing is like these procedurally generated waveform levels that, like, each mechanic or each like item in the world, each whatever, has its own sound, but then they're randomly sort of put together to be, the levels will be generated. It was just a really fascinating talk on how, like, oh, what if I make this, because it's kind of first and foremost a a music experience with some story elements and a lot of exploration. And I haven't picked it up really much since I did that video. And again, there's so many games I need to get back to that I've started that I really want to finish because, the story or the gameplay mechanics or whatever are just good. But again, there's so many other things to do. There's so many other games to play, things to do. And then I always want to make sure that I keep coming out, playing different things so I have things to cover on the channel and talk about and whatnot. But Periphery Synthetic, pick it up on Steam if you have not done so, because it is it's a really zen kind of game. And sometimes that is just what the doctor ordered. So that was a great session. Accessibility to Burnout Pipeline. That was a good session. So many people are feeling burnt out, overworked these days. Company, especially if you're in a professional job. I mean, I've seen this tons of different places. Hell, our organization had this problem a few years ago. We're definitely better off than we were a few years ago. But people get laid off or people quit or whatever, and then you're kind of just asked to do more with less resources. And a lot of times, especially in the accessibility sphere, companies they're getting a lot better about, paying and compensating people for their work, but at the same time, there's a lot of work that people might do kind of for free just because they want to make something more accessible. They want, whether it's for themselves or for other people, but there's any number of reasons. And like I said in the Discord the other day, for me, the hardest thing for me is to say no. It's like, oh, this opportunity came up, that opportunity came up. How do I fit that into my schedule? How can I, because I want to do it. Like I genuinely love what I do. My day job, I like a lot. But I would say I love my consulting and this gaming stuff even more. So I have a good balance, but sometimes you just got to say, you know what, I got too much on my plate or I need a break. As much as I love doing it, I've got to, just take things as they come, I guess. But that was a pretty good session too. That was a cool way to wrap up the day. And then we have day 2. Oh yeah, Seeing into the future is developing an accessible game for tomorrow today. That was just a really cool thing, from developers, where starting early, the whole process of not just considering accessibility from the beginning, but including accessibility consultants, people with disabilities in the development process. It's stuff that we've sort of covered before, but it's always a good thing to hear, and it was still a really interesting. I always like hearing from developers to hear what their approach was, what worked for them, what didn't work for them. Oh yes, open worlds and ADHD. This was a neat session, and I find even a lot of what she said, I can identify with that, and I don't even have ADHD. Again, you come back to a game, or there's so many things you're I call it my shiny object complex, where it's like, I'm going to go do this quest or the side quest. Oh, what's that over there? Shiny object. And then you get distracted and you're like, yeah, I was going to do this thing 3 hours ago and I totally didn't do it. But I mean, there's a lot more to it than that. But strengths of what an open world game is good in some cases, but it can be a struggle in other cases for ADHD. And it was another interesting session. Cognitive accessibility in Star Wars Jedi Survivor. That one was kind of a neat one too, just all the considerations that they put in of like how to like tell people like where to go, how not to overload people, kind of, keep them on track. There were still a few things. I tried that game and I was sort of bad at. I really, really want to like that game because it's beautiful. I like the lightsaber combat. I like the. It's a lot of times it's the traversal and figuring out where I'm supposed to go that is sort of the problem in those games. Um, but it is a cool game, and that was a good session. Open hashtag open for Naughty Dog. This was the player. This was the gamer panel for day 2, and we had God. Who was it? Ross, Miner, Carlos, and like 2 other people. I forget everybody's name. I'm sorry. Um, but it was a really, really good session about not just like a tribute to Brandon Cole, Super Blind Man, R.I.P. buddy, but like, carrying on his legacy. And a lot of things I've already talked about to some degree in this and other videos where, games take time. I know this year has been a rough year, not as much happening in the way of blind accessibility in games. But I think, like there's a lot to look forward to. Games take time. They're, and what I like is that there's starting to be a lot more different genres of like, oh, if you want to look, here's how you make a platformer accessible. Here's how you make a third person action game accessible. We have a simulation racing game now. We have fighting games. We have your point and click adventures. There's a fair few of those. We have some accessible card battler games. And then thanks to mods, we have things like Stardew Valley or Doom or Hearthstone or Balatro, which I still need to check out. So like there's between native accessibility in a game and mods, there's getting to be a lot more genres represented. And now that you have these, because here the thing is like I said, I'm more interested. I play a lot more indie games than I do AAA lately. But what AAA accessibility does is it really gets attention out there because everybody sort of, that's what the mainstream audience follows, is these AAA games. So when they see God of War or Spider-Man or Forza, Mortal Kombat, The Last of Us, when they see those, they're like, oh wow, these things, like blind people are playing these. Whether that's the players or especially developers, and like, oh crap, well we're making a game like that. There's starting to be an expectation, again, just like how subtitles were not common 10 years ago, and now it's pretty much standard. I mean, granted, some games implement it better than others, but it's still pretty much a standard. And for things like, start out with things like narration and text size, high contrast, those might be a little bit easier to do, but once the engines get better and add more native accessibility, I would love to see menu narration and navigation assist become more common for action games. Like they said in the panel, open world games, that's a genre that, there's been semi-open worlds, like we had the part in The Last of Us 2 that was pretty open. There was aspects of Spider-Man 2 that were God of War, but not really a true open world game, whether that's something like Skyrim or Grand Theft Auto or whatever it happens to be. Like that, once they do that, if somebody tackles that, and again, it wouldn't surprise me. I would hope within the next 5 years. We went from simple games to, boy, when that Last of Us Part 2 came out, yeah, and then Forza, and there's just, like I said, there is hope. There's a lot more attention. I mean, come on, we have 2 game accessibility conferences each year. In the news update, we're talking about a few other specific game accessibility events, more regional. So this thing is catching on. It's just going to take time. And the more that people do it, the more that companies make this stuff more accessible, the more that it is going to be expected, the more that it is going to be standardized. But we have to get to that point because right now, as I said, I think a lot of times one of the major barriers too is that everybody has to create the wheel every time. It's like every time I want to write a Word document, I got to code the whole damn word processor. And we need to get to the point where, oh, I need to make blind accessibility. Yeah, I might have to tweak it. But if I can get a good starting point and get 50% of the way there, even 70% of the way there, and then tweak it to what my game is, what's unique about my game, that would be huge. Just for less work, it would be, easier to do. There would be so many pluses to that. And that's where I hope all of this stuff goes with Unreal and Unity and all that. So that was a really good panel and chat. Dungeons and Disabled session, that was more about like creating like a tabletop role-playing game experience. That was a Steve Saylor topic, and that was pretty interesting. I've wanted to try D&D a few times. I've just never really found people to do it with. A couple friends and I, we tried it very, very briefly one time, but everyone's schedule just never really worked out, and then it just overall fell apart. So, again, I don't know if that's something that I'd be able to do even if I wanted to, but I love the idea, and so that was a neat session. Consultant to in-house. This was a neat session because they were talking about like how somebody went from being an accessibility consultant, like myself, and then getting hired to go work as an accessibility specialist in a game company. So going to be internal, and what did they wish that they knew? What did they, what skills helped out? She talked about a lot about soft skills. It's like, yes, you have the technical knowledge and background and things, but how well can you articulate yourself? Can you be presentable? Can you write properly? Can you speak properly? Can you just all these soft skills, can be almost, if not more important than your technical skills. So again, good reminder for a lot of people. That was a good session. Hell welcomes all. This was, they had a speaker set up, but that fell through. So they played this recent documentary from Diablo 4 about making their game more accessible, and they featured blind and low vision, but also other people with disabilities. And it was just a really cool thing. And we had a good conversation in Discord, and I remember remarking at the end, I'm like, boy, Hell is a really popular place this time of year. We got 2 sessions. We got Doom and Diablo. I thought it would be a little bit tasteless. I was going to say, see everybody in Hell, but no, I thought that probably would be a little bit too far, but that's, weird twisted humor. But yeah, I mean, it's just really so cool. These cool games like Diablo and Doom, and just, it was such a cool thing. So that was a fun session. And then how to break line in subtitles. This was an Ian Hamilton short session where they're talking about how to format subtitles better. Again, especially if you're doing subtitle work, and like I'm not as much into that because I can't read them anyway. But no, this is super important. And like I said, subtitles have been a thing for a long time, but that doesn't mean that they're doing them well. So that was a good session. Accessible gadgets for gamers. This was a cool one. Applying accessibility in therapeutic settings. So like, this was a really, Warfighter Engaged. They worked with veterans and like, not just like how to make gaming accessible to someone with a disability, but how can you use rehabilitation in the rehab process. Like, let's say, they need to learn how to stand again or use their limbs again, or, he was talking about one example where like the guy could only stand for a few seconds when doing some other task, like putting a puzzle together. But if you distract him with like a game where he's really a lot more engaged in it, a lot more engrossed, it's a heck of a distraction. And he was able to stand for like 7 minutes instead of 1 minute. And so, you just interesting things like that. And then he put together this, I can't even remember what it's called now, rehab. Uh, I'll have to try to remember to put a link in the description. Um, but he put a really good resource on, finding resources to like where to find adaptable controllers or just all. I haven't even looked at the website, but he gave an overview of it, and this is something he just literally unveiled at the Game Accessibility Conference. So that's going to be a really nice, really cool thing. That was a really cool session, especially when you think about like again, the potential that gaming had. People, and even to this day, like to my parents to some degree, they write off gaming as, oh, it's not important. Like you're just wasting your time. I mean, people come home and they watch TV for 4 hours a night or more. They do, he said, well, people do gardening and they don't see any waste of time with that. How is gaming any different than TV or reading or listening to music or whatever, and it's not just kids in their dark basement, with no social skills, I mean, gaming can be a very social, experience, especially for people with disabilities who can't get out of their home as easily and socialize because inaccessible events or lack of transportation or any number of reasons. So, no, gaming is great. Again, anything in moderation, but good session. Developing the latest Xbox hardware. This was a cool session because they talked more about like the adaptive controllers. They got the adaptive joystick coming out next year, and that's only going to be like $30. So I like the fact that they're making it accessible, affordable. They talked about like these toppers that you can get. So like if you have an Elite controller, you get these different heights and shapes of analog sticks that you can do. They just talked a lot about like the different hardware that they've been trying to do at Microsoft and the Xbox division. So, again, not a lot that I would necessarily have to use personally, but I think it's awesome, not just the adaptive controller, but now you have third-party options. You have like adaptations for the analog sticks. You're going to have this adaptive joystick. And they're, again, it's cool. They're thinking about not just the controllers, but the marketing, the packaging, like easy open packaging, the support through it, the flexibility, having it work on Windows and Xbox, and so that was how they ended the conference, and then just kind of a wrap up. So that was the Game Accessibility Conference. Overall, I thought it was really good. There were quite a few sessions on blind and low vision accessibility. I mean, there was the Doom one, there was the like Diablo to some degree, there was Zach's session, there was the panel about the Brandon, and then the Brandon tribute and moving forward panel. There was a lot of it. I mean, again, I'm glad that there was other stuff too, because I like to learn about other disabilities and other things as well. So there was, I think, a pretty solid representation, both from the development side, consultant side, the gamer side. Another winner as usual. And if you go to the IGDA, was it GASIG? Just look up the Accessibility Conference 2024. You'll find it on YouTube. Sounds like they already have a lot of the pre-recorded sessions already up in archive, so if you missed them, check them out. Again, a very fun and productive couple of days, and I really don't feel like going to work tomorrow, but I gotta. So that is where we are gonna wrap it up here. I've got so many other games to play, you guys, videos to record. I got a couple, maybe one or two more demos left I got to do. There's some retro shooters that have been coming out around Halloween. There's some beat 'em ups. There's two new Turtles games that I got to play coming up. Either one's out and one's coming out in like 2 weeks. There's just so much stuff. So still a lot of games, still a lot of indie games. A couple other projects I'm not at liberty to talk about right now, but there's been some promising things. Again, we do have that Site Tech Global coming up in early December. I'm going to be a panel for part of that, so check that out. Register for that for free if you'd like as well. And that is where we're going to wrap it up. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Give it a like if you did. Follow me on Twitter at BGFH79, twitch.tv/illegally-cited, illegally-cited.com, and right here on YouTube. Happy Halloween, and I'll chat with you guys again later.